dog. All right. I'm recording there. I'm recording there. And there she is, Dr. Christina Greer of Fordham University and author. Her new book, I've just told you about. Congratulations. Thank you very much for joining me. And I'm very excited to see you. And we're all very excited anytime you join the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year. I think I can
Happy
still
New
say
Year to you. Has
I
anything happened?
I still say Happy New Year until I see the person in the new year. If I see you in
Yes.
February, it'll be like Happy New Year.
Yeah, but would you say that if you saw me in June? I think there's a threshold. I think there's a threshold,
Yeah, I feel like all of January I say it.
right?
I think it's okay. So Happy New Year.
Do you have thoughts? You're a deep thinker. You're a spiritual person about like the new year or any traditions for yourself, any choices that you make? Do you do resolutions? What
Yeah.
does the new year mean to
Yeah.
you, smart person?
I am partaking in dry January for the very first time.
What
I
the
never do dry
hell?
I
Why?
never do dry January because the last few months I've been going hard in the paint. So I always I always give up alcohol for Lent and I do sober September. But my dad got sick in September, so I was like, bump this. And then I did damp October. And so I was like, you know what, Greer, we need to check in with ourselves. And so I'm doing dry January, which feels okay. So there's a level of clarity that I have dealing with life. And I'm like, whew. So listen, all is in divine order. That's my mantra. Even though we started off New Year's Day with tragedy in New Orleans, which is where I have family. And so that was really heartbreaking and really hard to process. And then I have lots and lots of friends and dear loved ones in Los Angeles, some of whom have been affected specifically and directly by the fires. Others are just in limbo. So it feels like a wild, chaotic start to the year. Again, all is in divine order. I do view fire as a regenerative force where it is time to start anew. It's going to be a really long and difficult road for a lot of communities. It's not just like a family, a house. But if we think about phoenixes rising from the ashes, I do
Yeah.
think that there's a way that we can imagine a society and a new way of thinking at some point. Obviously, it's still very new and raw for a lot of families who are still going through it. I mean, there's no containment. And I feel like all of a sudden now it feels like California is really far away. Like I wish I could be doing more for my friends who are there. Holding like a lot of emotions, but I do fundamentally believe that all is in divine order, whatever that is. And January 20th is looming very large for me as a political scientist. And I told you earlier, I wrote this piece in my weekly column for the Amsterdam News where I'm like trying not to have anticipatory anxiety about the incoming regime.
Yeah.
Just kind of like try and remember what is in my control. I can only control what I can control. I cannot control the whims of a 77-year-old man with an ego and tons of power and resources. So, can I donate to
He's
candidates?
78.
He's 78 now, joy. Can I donate to candidates who are doing amazing work across the country on local and state and federal levels? Yes. Can I have friend raisers for different people who are interested in getting into politics and who I think should meet other people when they come to New York? Yes. Like can I influence the youth of America to think about politics as and public service as a noble and realistic profession? Absolutely. I'm trying to do my part, but I can't get too far ahead of my skis thinking about all the tomfoolery that this regime can bring.
That's really great perspective, a healthy perspective. I'm wildly unsurprised that you hold it. You've written a piece about it. I'm looking forward to hearing more details about this. I mean, we all are sharing in this anticipatory anxiety of when he takes power because it's already been like riding the buck and bronco that is this child, and he's not even in power yet. So it seems like it's going to be, you know, even harder, and we've been through this to a certain extent before, so it's less shocking. Any other thoughts about the specifics around this guy taking power again, and where your focus or the focus of media or the public's focus should
Yeah.
be as he spreads his shit wide and
Mhm.
far and floods the zone with insidious lies and gish
Yeah.
gallops all the way through the media cycle, all, and we have to decide which hook we're going to bite.
Yeah. I mean, I think the second term's more dangerous because he's like case the joint in the first term. The second term's more dangerous, I think, because he has fewer deep thinking Republicans. Like the first time he did have Republicans who cared about this nation. And that's why they're like, sorry, sir, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. This time he's not even bothering with those individuals. And he literally has the bottom of the barrel and people who have borderline like Nazi tattoos on as high ranking cabinet officials. The quality of people he's surrounding himself with is just denigrated, and like the sycophant level has just been elevated, and the media by and large hasn't learned a lot of lessons, and they've been following this man in every single whim since 2015, even during the Biden era. But I think it's incumbent upon us to just not treat him like the kid who keeps dropping Cheerios on the floor and we keep picking them up expeditiously. I don't know about you, but like my desire to be on television talking about Donald Trump has decreased. So when people call and it's like, "Hey, we're doing a story on why he said Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico." It's like, I'm not interested in talking about
Yes.
that.
Oh,
I
sorry,
don't
that's
want
my
to.
answer. My answer is when the producer calls or texts before they tell me what it's about, I go, "Yes,
Yeah, and so for
I'm
me,
available. I'm available."
I'm I'm no longer available. If it's something that I really have a strong feeling about, I might make myself available on
If they're
Zoom.
like, "Do you have any suggestions?" and they're looking for your type, a PhD, black woman or something, just say my name.
I mean, don't even get me started on that. But, for example, like
Happy to.
CNN, like they like to nowadays like their whataboutism is just infuriating. The sort of MSNBC feels like they're on their own planet and talking to a very specific audience, and CNN is let's just talk about both sides, maybe. And it's just I don't have the stomach, the interest, or the desire to be a part of those conversations right now because I think all it does is just fuel this man, and he feeds off of us
Yeah.
constantly talking about him, worrying about him, plotting, all these things. And it's no, we have to a certain extent,
But
we actually decrease his power by going about our own lives and like giving him, we know he just needs the attention.
I generally agree with that, and who cares what I think? I care what you think. You're a lot smarter, but what do you think if you saw, for example, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett dressing down Scott Jennings? Did you see that clip?
I did.
Oh,
I mean,
good.
that's her role in society. And like she's a congresswoman, but she's now also taking the mantle of like the resistance, which is
Which
great
is
for her
great
and it'll be
for her
great
and
for
be
her
great.
career. I'm getting a little feedback.
You're good.
But that to me is like she can choose to do that. I am not interested in taking that road this particular time. And keep in mind, she was an elected official during the first iteration of DJT. So there's a certain level of energy that she has that some of us just straight up don't have. We did 4 years of talking about him and debating with people who are basically questioning our existence and right to claim ourselves as Americans. Like I am thoroughly disinterested in getting on television and debating with some white man about whether or not I have a right to exist as an American, as a Black American. Like that's
So
not what I want to do.
I understand that, and I would never tell you not to trust do what makes you. But I just want to say what you and you probably dress me down and criticize me for this reaction, but I want to see it. Like I want to see that. I think it's helpful when I see that. I think it's helpful when I do it as a white man, but I also think as a black person to putting a white person in their place in that moment. I think that's good. I like it. Am I wrong for feeling that way?
You can feel that way. You can feel whatever you want to feel, but here's the piece that a lot of people don't understand. It's like when the cameras go off, we still have to process the fact that someone told me to my face that I don't have a right to exist. It's not just an intellectual conversation that we're having. There's a real emotional toll that it takes. And sometimes when people say really
Yes.
jacked up stuff on these shows, it is really hard to just go home and wash it off. You're thinking about it
Oh
for
yeah.
days.
No.
Like you're processing what you should have said, how you said certain things. You're
Yeah.
dealing with the hate mail. You're dealing with people calling you the
Threats.
N word, the B word, the threats on your social media, the threats to your phone, the threats to your email. Like all of these things, especially Black women, all the data has shown
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we get it the most. Women get it more than everybody
I
else.
get it.
Like,
I always say I get it really bad, but it's not near what a woman or a black woman gets
yeah.
because it's a woman, it's sexual
I mean, listen, when
threats. If it's a
people
black woman, it's sexual threats and racism. And it's I just get, could you tuck your teeth in?
and mine is I want to rape you and lynch you. Like, you should be raped and lynched. And so that's, yeah, fine. You're hiding in the anonymity of the internet, but it's still an energy. And I believe in energy because I hug
Yep.
trees. But that energetic space of dealing with that type of person and then all of the people that they unleash into your cyber world and your internet world, like your email. And just like, I live in the city, so public safety is like something that I don't fully think about because most New Yorkers are a certain way. And I don't really think that most New Yorkers are the people who harass me on the internet, but you just don't know. And so if someone comes up to me, like in the farmer's market, someone's, hey, are you Christina Greer? It's the
Yeah.
farmer's market. I feel less threatened because it's the farmer's market. And these are people who know my voice from FAQ because it's my podcast. And I'm asking for apples or my duck, and someone's, hey, are you Christina Greer? Because they know the voice because they care about New York City politics. That's great. But if I'm at a restaurant and someone's standing over me while I'm sitting down and they're like, are you Christina Greer? It's my blood pressure goes through the roof. I'm like, I don't
Right.
know because we're on TV. You see me, you see my glasses, you like, I have a distinct voice, blah, blah, blah. I just feel like there's a there's a public service that a lot of talking heads do, and especially for someone like me who's not getting paid from
Right.
MSNBC, my desire to give you my time, energy, and then also like to deal with the aftermath of all this nonsense has drastically decreased.
Appreciate that perspective, value it, and respect it a great deal. You put a lot of work into your career and into writing. Obviously, you've got this new book, and I want to ask you about it: How to Build a Democracy, from Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan to Stacey Abrams. A lot of people, a lot of Americans don't even know who at least the first two and maybe all three of those women are. Why did you pick these three women to write this subject about? I know you've been working on it for a pretty long time, and I remember you doing the research on Fannie Lou Hamer, for example, and being inspired and educated by what you learn. And so that's a great part for us to learn from all of that. But why this subject? Why these women?
Yeah. For those of your listeners who've written books, it's like you started, you put it down, times change, it was supposed to be published, there was like a cyber attack of the publisher, like all these things. It comes out when it comes out, right? But I was thinking about, I wrote this book called Black Ethnics and really thinking about the complexities and coalition building between Black Americans and immigrants and Black immigrants, Caribbeans and Africans. And it wasn't lost, and I'm not part of the ADOS crew. I don't believe that they're only true Black people. I don't believe that. I think that there's space for a myriad of types of Blackness.
ADOS, what does that stand for again?
The
I'm looking.
African descendants of slavery, they're like super anti-Black immigrant, and they're so sort of calcified, and they're thinking that oftentimes they end up repeating and like parroting right-wing talking points. It's fascinating.
Okay.
By and large, they like my book. Obviously, they have not read my book because I think if they've read it, they probably would not agree. But they have a very sort of active internet presence and can be pretty aggressive on their
Yeah,
thoughts.
I've ran into them once or twice, not directly, but so
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
And that's not, I don't believe in divisions. I'm literally trying to figure out how Black people can get more out of this democracy. But it wasn't lost on me that Barack Obama and also Kamala Harris are both A, biracial, and B, not descendants of the US South, and ergo US chattel slavery. And I was thinking about, I wrote a paper with some colleagues about Black women being the keepers of democracy and also the Democratic Party. And it starts with Black women in the US South and obviously expands over time to Black women across the country. We are by and large, as you've seen, immune to the nonsense of the Republican Party in ways that no other racial or ethnic group or gender behaves in the way that Black women do. And so I was thinking about, how did that happen? Like, where does it come from? And it's a lot of hard work. It's not like Black women just overnight became who we are as this powerful force. It's been a lot of like sowing of the seeds of Black
Yeah.
American women from the US South. And so thinking about the work of Stacey Abrams in 2018 and how close she came to possibly becoming the first Black female governor in the history of the United States, something we have yet to accomplish as a nation. Where did she come from? And so she's this dynamic politician that I felt wove the traditional insider politics with also outsider kind of activist politics and organizing
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
perfect way. And I was like,
yeah.
oh, so if Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan had a baby, it would be Stacey Abrams 50 years later. Like, that's basically, I was thinking about the work of someone like Fannie Lou Hamer, the work of someone like Barbara Jordan, who's the second, and she doesn't get as much play as Shirley Chisholm, who's the first Black woman ever elected to Congress, to the House of Representatives from the state of New York. But 4 years later, Barbara Jordan is the second Black woman elected to Congress from the state of Texas, and she's the first Black woman from the US South. And there's a difference between the North and the South, not according to Mark Twain or Malcolm X, but there are some differences. So I thought that it would be a really fascinating short book to put together, especially for students, to help them understand the organizing principles of someone like Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a major opponent to my favorite president, LBJ. My second president is Jimmy Carter. And then someone like Barbara Jordan, who was a mentee of LBJ. So also helping people understand the complexities of presidents, where one group of people can absolutely love him because of Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Immigration Act. But then also he's a good old boy at times and anti some of the principles of Fannie Lou Hamer.
I think my question now is about education. You're an educator. You understand where young people are at coming into Fordham and other institutions today. And when someone looks at, say, the title of your book or the conversation around democracy, a lot of young people don't even know what that means.
Mhm.
And so these three women, why did they care so much about democracy as Black women? I know it's obvious question and answer, but I feel like it's worth fleshing out for people who don't understand the importance of a democracy and democracy in general, much less America's history, flirtations with it, and the lack of democracy, of course, in the Jim Crow South, which is very different in terms of access to the ballot and so on. So I think it's worth almost explaining to young people what it is, what it was, and where we're at. Because I feel like a lot of young people and people our age, just for lack of education reasons, don't even understand what democracy is. But
Yeah.
Black folks and marginalized communities certainly do, because without it, they have less opportunity and more oppression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, and also there are a lot of small d democratic principles we take for granted. We're now like apoplectic and clutching pearls. Oh my gosh, is this new regime going to take these things away? These things were hard fought. Like we take a lot of things just as given. And so when you say Black people and marginalized groups, I think part of the reason why I wrote this book is like marginalized groups are free riders from the blood, sweat, and tears of Black people. And so you get more and more Asian Americans and Latinos who are starting to realize, oh, I wouldn't be able to live in this neighborhood, have this type of job, go to this type of school if it weren't for the blood, sweat, and tears and sacrifices and brutality that was unleashed upon Black people, the only group to have U.S. chattel slavery on this soil. So as we evolve and history has always been erased, book banning has always been a thing. This is why most people can name Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, maybe Sojourner Truth, maybe Frederick Douglass, and those are like the four Black people that ever existed in civil rights history. But there were hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
leaders across the country in all 50 states. Keep in mind, we're like 5 generations in Alaska, Black folks. So there are lots of people who've been erased purposefully from history. And Black history is American history, and it's always been viewed as this siloed thing that like, oh, that's for Black people. But if Black people and white people have been interconnected in this country since its inception, how is my history not directly connected to your history? We share a history.
Right.
So like American history, Black history is American history. When I had my Griot podcast, that was like the tagline.
Yeah.
Because for you not to know, white person, who Fannie Lou Hamer is, you should be mad that your school never taught you who she was. You should be mad that your parents didn't sit you around the dinner table talking about these things. There are Black people that we should all know collectively as a society. Because if not, you don't understand your own history. Even though some of the issues may have directly affected me, but I always tell my students when Tom Brokaw wrote that book called like The Greatest Generation, they're so obsessed with that generation. I was
Yeah.
like, you mean the generation that like kept my grandparents out of like decent jobs and
Yeah,
housing and
it
neighborhoods?
does
Like
not. It does not. I'm sure
it
that
doesn't compute. So we've
when
always had this
yeah,
fantasy fictionalized narrative of what this country is, and I think it's
yes,
incumbent
indeed.
upon academics to correct the record as much as we can and really introduce a new generation. I mean, when I ask my students who Shirley Chisholm is, they have zero idea. When I
Right.
tell them she was the first Black female congresswoman, okay. And then I'm like, and she's from what state? And it's like the state that we're currently living in. She's from Brooklyn. I'm like, how many of you are from Brooklyn? And you get 4 or 5 hands up, and they've never heard of this woman. So they've never heard of Barbara Jordan. So as we get farther and farther away from their legacies, it is incumbent upon us to just remind ourselves of the hard work that these women have put to making this country what it is.
You lost me at remind because, as you said, most people didn't know to begin with. That's the
Mhm.
point. Like, they
Yeah.
don't know to begin with about a lot of these things. You're not reminding them. I mean, and me included. I mean, I'm reading about your book. I couldn't have told you much about any of these women the way that I've learned in reading and talking to you about it. So it's vitally important for those reasons, because sadly you're not reminding.
Right.
You're teaching for the first time. It's so relevant right now as we watch our democracy dwindle. How are you looking at today's version of democracy? Everybody's using the O word, oligarchy.
Yeah,
A lot of people are using it. A lot of serious.
sure. I mean, we our democracy has always ebbed and flowed. This is just what America has always done. We've had progress and regress. We just happen to be in a regress moment. And we always get shocked when it's like, we're rolling back. But we've always done that if you read history and understand what this country has been. So, like, nothing in this country surprises me. Nothing white people do surprises me. Because, as I've said before in this podcast, as my grandmother nicely sat me down and told me, the only time you should be surprised is when you're surprised. So, no, I'm not surprised. Am I disappointed all the time? Sure. Sure, Jan, but not surprised. And so we're in a regress moment, but we've always had people in this country, multiracial groups of people who have fought to try and get us back on track. And it takes a second, and it takes, sadly, blood and sweat and tears, but it does happen. But we just have to make sure we never give up and just, oh, this is just the status quo. I think the saddest part for me is seeing my parents, who were in their late 70s, who have
Yeah,
fought and worked really, really hard to get the
right.
country in what looked like and felt like a progressive wind, seeing a lot of their hard work roll
Sure.
back. And my dad said, "This is not the country that I thought I'd be leaving at some point in time." I'm in the fourth quarter. So it's you work and work and work, and you think that by the fourth quarter you'll be able to relax. And he's clearly that's not in the cards for this country.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I really appreciate that perspective on it, but don't you think that this, as you say, regression, some people might call backlash or white lash when it comes to race and the Black Lives Matter movement, when it comes to gender and the Me Too movement, we went too far and all that. And history is documented. And I feel like a lot of that's what you're saying when you use this is a regress moment. But this seems different in that, specifically with these oligarchs and like these billionaires, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, being in such overt cahoots. I feel like you're going to give me like a cynical response, like we've always had a lot of money involved, but I feel like this is different. I feel like this one is different for some specific reasons of who these men are and what kind of money they have and how they're also doing similar things in other countries, very similar things. Do you not think it's different?
No, I mean, it's just much more complicated because, as you mentioned, we've got other countries involved. We've got satellites involved. Like Elon Musk is literally controlling satellites. And if Israel can
Yeah.
and Iran and international forces can detonate cell phones, we're dealing in a different kind of
Yeah.
type of warfare. However, I mean, when you look at like Carnegie money and Mellon money and all those names that we know that are on the buildings, the Vanderbilt money and all that stuff, it's it's equivalent to the Bezos and the Musks of today. And they definitely had influence in all levels of government. They oftentimes ran for office themselves. I think the difference now is we just have a lot more people quantity wise, and we have a lot more people participating, and it's a lot more diverse of the types of people who are participating, and it's a lot more naked. I mean, before it was like gentlemen's agreements where we can at least work across the aisles and we all recognize we don't want to be France where if we starve the people, the only thing the people have left to eat are the rich. Now it's these folks are like, then forget it, we'll just deport them or figure it out, and who cares. But don't forget, like when we had all these, what would now be, they were millionaires back then, but they're the equivalent of a billionaire. I mean, we had so few people in the competitive workforce, right? You kept black people out, you kept a lot of immigrants out, and you kept women out. Like the number of people that actually could even get a slice of the pie, potentially get a slice of the pie, was so much smaller. Now it's the veneer of possibility is there, but we know that you can call it the glass ceiling, the bamboo ceiling, like all these ways that certain groups can only get to a particular height. Or if they do get to a particular height, it's a setup. right? You become president of a university, but you have a billionaire who's mad that you're the president of the university. So from day one, they just sit there and start a campaign to undermine you in every single way in shape and form. So you can't even do your job. So I think we just have a lot more players and it's a lot more complicated because we are so interconnected globally and in a tech space. But I would argue that this country has always been who she is. And so the influence of very, very white, powerful and wealthy white men to get what they want is not anything that is brand new to this country. Instead of
So
trading people, we're just trading widgets.
right. I have a lot to unpack with that, but I want to move on to one other thing I want to talk with you about, which is you mentioned Jimmy Carter is your
Ugh.
favorite president.
He was my favorite living president. LBJ is my favorite president, period. So Jimmy was a number 2.
So just before we talked, I went over to what's called Twitter, where Michael Harriot is still active.
Mhm.
And Michael had tweeted, whitewashing the uncomfortable parts of the past doesn't just affect Black stories. For example, you can't fully appreciate how a peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia became a beloved president unless true Black history, the unwhitewashed history of Jimmy Carter, a thread. And then he writes an essay about the history of the Carter family and how they got to be whoever they were. And
Mhm.
I wonder if you have any thoughts around the the whitewashing of Carter, specifically the nuances around who he was and why you say he's your second favorite.
Yeah, I mean, of all presidents and all men, they get whitewashed in history, sure. One, I always tell Michael, I hope he one day collects all these really important threads and puts them in a book, just because his level of detail is really fascinating.
Yeah.
The reason why I tell my students that they all have to have a favorite president, one, they just have to have one favorite president. But if we want to get a little complicated, we can have a favorite living president and a favorite deceased president. The reason why I make them sit there and think about it and tell me is because I need them to understand that none of these men are perfect. And if we're sitting around waiting for a perfect presidency, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get a perfect man. When I tell people I love LBJ, I have to be careful with my effusive love of LBJ, because if I'm talking to a Vietnam vet, they're ready to throw me down a flight of stairs. They think I'm absolutely insane, whether they're Black or non-Black,
Right.
right?
Right.
But my love for LBJ stems from how he was able to wrangle through the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Immigration Act, the Housing Act, and larger programs within the Great Society. With Jimmy Carter and the Carter family, I mean, if we start going through white people's family histories, that's a losing proposition. But if I think about how much I care about the environment, and did he have some racist family members? Absolutely. Was he always on the right side of history? I mean, LBJ was like a good old boy. I mean, he rampant use of the N word in the Oval Office. So when I think about someone like Jimmy Carter, who put solar panels on the White House in the late 70s, I think about the potential. And we start a conversation of talking about the wildfires in California and the drought and all these other sort of environmental catastrophes that continue to befall communities
Yeah.
across all 50 states that are affecting all different types of people. If I think about the potential of Jimmy Carter as an environmentalist president, I can't not respect his vision of what he's done. If I think about Jimmy Carter as a man after the presidency, the thousands upon thousands of houses that he's built, that people in DC and all over the country still live in, first homes, an opportunity, especially for poor people and certain communities of Black people who never would have had an opportunity to own anything in this country were it not for Jimmy Carter and his literal physical labor of building homes. We can't imagine on a micro and macro level what he did for 40 years after he was kicked out of office. So, was he a perfect?
Eradicating that worm parasite
Yeah,
was
seriously, you can't wrap your mind around the public service. He wasn't interested in going to Hollywood and making money.
right.
He wasn't interested in building some like global democracy center and making money. Yes, I'm throwing shade at lots of former presidents who were doing that. So, as a public servant, I can't I dare you to name me a president who in from JFK to the present who did more as a public servant than Jimmy Carter.
Right.
So for me, I'm not looking for a perfect litmus test. I'm not looking for a perfect past of someone's family history. That's not my interest. I'm looking for, what did you do, especially for Black people, but what did you do for Americans? What did you do for this country? What did you do for Black people? And I'm like, if I'm lining Jimmy Carter up, let's look at the sample size, because I'm not comparing Jimmy Carter
Right.
to a random carpenter or a random businessman.
Right.
I'm comparing Jimmy Carter to the small group of people in his set. And so that would be, start with LBJ, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. Boom. Where's where's the question? Where is the question? There is
Right.
no question. There is
Right.
no debate.
Right.
So
I mean, part
there's
I
that.
feel like one of the most important points about him was that he was not without an ego. He ran for president. He was president, but it did not seem to drive him the way it does the carpenter, all other presidents, most men, me. Like, ego was not front and center for him. He had a ranch house. He didn't care that much seemingly about money. He lived his values, but it like wasn't about so much about him. And he's the anti-Trump, the anti-average man, really, in terms of the way he looked at himself, talked about himself, put himself out there. It just didn't seem like ego was such an animating motivation for him as he walked through life and lived each day, the way it is
Look,
for most of us, men
listen,
especially.
everyone says about the presidency, but you can translate this to governors, mayors, whomever. The presidency doesn't change you. It exposes who you are.
Mm,
It doesn't change your behavior. It just highlights your intrinsic behavior. And so the presidency exposed Jimmy Carter was a good man. Like the same way Joe Biden's legacy in the long run will show he's a good man. He cared about this country. He didn't steal from the country. He didn't help people steal from the country. Does he have missteps? Sure. Management skills lacking at times? Okay. But we have yet to find a perfect president. But I do think that there's like this non-quantifiable characteristic that we only respect years after someone's been booted out of office, and that's, are you a good person? Joe Biden said messed up racial things. So did you. So have all of them.
yeah. Yeah.
All of them,
Yeah.
Obama included.
Yeah.
I just think that no, whitewashing history is not healthy or necessary. But I'm like, am I going to pick the kernels out that actually do matter?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to do so, because I need my students to understand, as they work their way up the public service ladder, like, I'm not asking for perfection. It's not going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to compromise. You're going to have to screw some people over, sadly, and it happens. The key is, how can you decrease the number of people you have to let go as you climb up the mountain?
Yes. Yes. Very well said. All right. Before I let you go, something completely different.
What's that?
What is your, let's go to Chrissy Greer now. What is Chrissy's relationship with this season of the year? You spent most of your life, I feel like, living in the Northeast. You have traveled as much as most people I know. You do like the sun, but you live in Brooklyn. What is your advice? What is your relationship with and advice around winter? We've got a good 8 weeks of cold. It's very cold right now in the Northeast. Go ahead, take it away.
So I tell my students all the time, seasonal affective disorder is real. And so,
Mhm.
like, for people who do feel depressed, like, it's okay, right? You're not going crazy. Millions and upon millions of people are affected by it. So I'm doing like little things. One, it's cold as all get out, but I still, like, I'm trying to walk and see my little birds, because there's still birds out
Okay,
there,
you go
right?
out there, you bundle up, you bundle yourself
Yeah,
up, you
but
cover
like,
your face.
listen, treated myself to a nice big coat when I was on a work trip in Vancouver. I was like, they know what cold is. Let me get this coat. So
I assumed a coat, but what are we doing on our head? Is there a big scarf for Chrissy out
no,
there?
I
All skin?
so when I went to Iceland, I bought myself a fleece, little, like those mini turtlenecks. And I just wear it all the time. It's amazing. I have a cashmere hat that's hot as all get out.
Okay.
So like, cashmere is my thing. I have my cashmere sweater now. I wear a lot of cashmere. I got into it during lockdown. So I'm bundled up. I watch the birds. I've been painting my nails fluorescent colors in winter, and the number of people who stop me on the street to say thank you for my nails, they're like, they just brought me so much joy.
Wow.
So I've been painting my, right now, it's like, I choose a color for every year. Last year, the color was green. Nature, health, wellness, wealth, the
Oh,
whole thing. This year, the color's orange, the color of peace. And so peace within myself, peace in the world, right? I went to Catholic school. We used to sing the song, your listeners, those of you who went to Catholic school know, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. So I'm like, there's a reason why the song is the song. It makes total sense. So I started off the year with my orange. Again, everyone's like, your nails make me so happy. Sure. Okay. Like they make me happy. So I'm glad that they can
That's
make
great.
someone else happy.
So you
Because
don't
most
wear
people,
so you purposely don't wear gloves because of the happiness your bright orange nails bring. So
well,
you're out there
I,
without gloves because of the power
no,
of your hands.
I wear gloves. I tend to not love gloves because I need my hands, but I wear the gloves with the half, where
Oh,
the
that's smart. So you
with
wear
the fingers
fingerless
out.
gloves so they
Yeah,
can still get the joy of your fingers,
but also
but you're not cold. I like it.
and I'm also on the subway, so I need to get in my wallet to get things out. So
Text, you gotta be able to you can't text without a glove.
exactly. I always have trips lined up, so, like, I'm in the process of lining up trips to stay warm and get out of New York. I'm a firm believer, you have to leave New York to love New York. Like,
Right, right.
if you stay in the city, I just feel like, at least for me, it makes me less compassionate in the sense that, the go go go, where I'm like looking
Right.
at elderly people, I'm looking at people in strollers, and I'm like, beat it. So it's okay when you're trying to push aside an 85-year-old. It's time for me to take a
That's
quick
time to take
vacation.
a break.
It's
Yeah.
time to just take a quickie,
Wow.
someplace, someplace preferably
Okay,
warm.
so
Like,
I've got it. I get give me another one. Is there a candle? Is there a scent? Is there a food you
oh.
prepare? What animal do you slaughter? You will eat any animal. And my understanding is you'll eat any animal, any part of any animal from what I can tell. So
Not
what
any part, but I do. So in my freezer right now, I have oxtail,
yeah,
goat,
yeah,
duck, ostrich, bison,
yeah.
chicken, and
You're
fish.
basically Afghan.
Right. I don't know. I'll just eat. I like good tasting meat. Now, right now, I'm trying to like slow down on meat because over the holidays I was just eating
It doesn't
everything in my
actually
sight.
sound like you are, given your
No, it's. I
freezer.
said in my freezer. In my freezer. I haven't made it
Consider your
yet.
freezer contents. It
But
sounds like you're a cave
yeah,
person.
I am. But I make soups. Like I love making soups because all you have to do is start with a good mirepoix, and then all my soups have
What?
the
What was
same
the
base.
word? What was the word?
Mirepoix. So like
Okay, take it
the
down a
un
notch,
the
friend.
your listeners know. It's the onion, celery, carrot combo.
Oh, okay.
That's it. That's the basis of all French,
I'm new to all
cooking.
this. This is for me. All of
So
this is yeah.
every soup starts the same way. I chop up an onion, I chop up a few stalks of celery, I chop up a carrot. Okay, I don't really like carrots that much, so I keep them a big chunk because I don't like the taste of cooked carrots. And then I put in a whole bunch of water, a bouillon cube, a whole bunch of like salt, pepper, garlic, onion, salt, or onion powder, just because it's not too salty, is because I have a bouillon cube. And then I add in whatever I want my soup to be, whether it's potato soup or cauliflower or broccoli. This
Okay.
time I just made like a lentil cauliflower potato soup, threw in some curry and some cumin coriander, boom. Put it on the oven for 3 hours. And people
All
have crock
right.
pots and all this
I
other stuff.
like it. So
I
that's
love soup. I
I learned both
love
a new
soup.
word and a bunch of recipes to start
Yes.
from that. Okay.
Yes. My
Um,
cauliflower
is
soup is legendary
what
because
is
I
your
put cayenne
relationship?
pepper in it.
What?
I put cayenne pepper in it, so it's a
Oh, you're
spicy.
scaring me. You're making me feel unsafe. But what is your relationship with scents in your home? Do you have a diffuser, incense,
No.
candles, candle
Okay.
heater? Apparently,
So
black women use candle heaters.
no, I don't use candle. I have a ritual. The moment I wake up, I light 2 incense in my house,
You
one in the
do.
kitchen and one in the living room. The second I wake up, and I put on my morning music while I make my coffee. That is the first thing I do. I leave my bedroom while I'm drinking the last bit of my water from the night before. I put on 2 incense, turn on music, and then make my coffee. Boom, boom, boom. That is like the set. I It
What music?
depends on whatever I have a taste for, and I have a huge like liked list on Spotify, and it's crazy and eclectic, and it's on shuffle. So sometimes I just let that be what it is. I have these great Sheila Bridges candles.
Do you share your playlists
So
ever with
here's the problem. I just heart songs and I never made them in a playlist. So I
Okay,
have
it
a
should.
thousand songs that are hearted, but like my best friend is furious because she can't get they're not a playlist. They're just my liked songs. And I
Yeah,
need
so
to
you should do
transfer.
that for
And
us.
Spotify doesn't have a way for you to in bulk to transfer liked songs. Like I can't
I
just click all of my
I
liked songs and move them
understand
to
the
a playlist.
struggle, but it's never too
Yeah.
late to
I
aggregate
know.
these for us and
Well,
share 'em.
maybe I can hire a research assistant that's, hey, your job today is just move all my stuff
Chrissy
over
is not doing this. I see
there.
it. Alright, so you got the incense, you got the
Yeah.
music, and you
I
got
I have a spruce candle that I love from West Elm. I have a scented there are 3 different scents, but the purple scent of Sheila Bridges, it's more of a weighty scent. I have a super fancy diptyque candle that my lawyer best friend from middle school gave me that's like super fancy, and it feels makes the house feel very heavy. My mom burns a lot of candles, and like growing up, my dad was like, "It's like a seance in here." He was like, "Why are there so many candles?"
I don't know your dad, but I feel like I do.
Oh,
Okay,
I
so
love it.
finally, I guess the final category, and maybe you can think of one more, but I think I just wanted to ask you about how you deal with early dark and how you deal with darkness.
Yeah. I'm trying to wake up a little bit earlier so I can at least
Okay.
enjoy the
Okay.
morning. When I was in Mexico with my family for break, I woke up every single morning and watched the sunrise. I have a theory that if you watch the sunrise, you're guaranteed to have a good day. So, as much as you can, if you can somehow be in a space awake where you're seeing dark to light, it just helps. I just think it sets the day as like a guaranteed good day. And it happens every day. Like this beautiful treat happens every day. When you're on the sub, for those of your listeners who are New Yorkers, like the B and the D and the Q that go above ground and you're crossing the water and it's gorgeous, especially on your way to work in the morning. Most people aren't even looking up, they're on their phones. And I literally want to just like stand up and be the crazy lady on the train. It's like, everybody put your phones down and look out of the window. It's amazing. Like it's gorgeous. But listen, it gets dark. Okay, so what's the plan? Yes, I need to be working out more and all that jazz, but I still get my massages just to try and like I carry a lot of stress. Like intellectually, I'm like, let all this shit go. But
Yeah.
like physically, I hold it. So like I need professionals to like
It's funny
iron
that
it out.
it's so funny that you say that because I feel that way about you. Like you deal so intellectually. You've helped me deal so intellectually well with all my personal issues and problems. You're like the best friend to have because you're the best advice giver. You're a caretaker. You're like one of the only people who has send me cards and thoughtful things. But
I support the USPS.
but the truth is your body knows the score. And
Yeah,
so it goes in that stress goes
yeah,
into your body. And if you don't deal with it there, then bad things can happen. So
yeah.
that's what the massage and other
Yeah, and
things are
like
for. I think for a lot of people, cardio and other physical activities too help with that to get that stuff that's inside your body,
just
whatever.
have to get it out. And I mean, this is why I'm doing dry January because
Mm,
I know that like part of me going through life is like the drunk lady on the Titanic is because I always have a glass of champagne in my hand. Like I drink a lot of champagne. And so I owe it to myself to be disciplined and have a January where it's like, hey, listen, if you can't get through 31 days of not having a gin cocktail or champagne, then we have a different conversation that we have to have.
mm.
And as academics and lawyers and politicians are the top three groups that have alcohol issues, I have a god sister who's a very dear friend of mine who is going on 4 years sober. And I've been on that journey with her as one of her best friends. And so I don't want it to get ever to that point. And it's not a judgment call. It's just something that I'm cognizant of because I am child free. I can control my schedule. I only have to be in the office 2 days a week. I go more than that, but there are ways that it's very easy to like wake up and be like, "Oh my god, like life is crazy. Let me just have a quick beer." The way a lot of us were living during COVID days, and it's, "Hey, guess what, Greer? It's not COVID days." So we actually need to just monitor the situation. And I was like, "I've never done dry January." I started off the new year shoveling grapes in my mouth because I was in Latin American nation, and I was like, "Let that be a new start."
Wow, this is great. This last segment here, conversation about Chrissy's winter advice should go viral. It's very helpful from the nails to the recipes to the scents to everything else.
Look at this. Look at
I
this. Look at
appreciate you sharing all those secrets with us, and it made me feel good. And I really like the sunrise thing too, especially everything you
Did I
said.
send you some of those pictures, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I was
Yeah.
doing it for a while. It's very hard for me to manage my schedule, but I love I'm a morning person, but I stay up late to do the podcast for the reasons to do it. But I mean, I do love getting up with the sun. I've been trying to a few days a week, and it's wonderful. So it's great, great.
Yeah. And I mean, I need to do it more because that's also when the birds are up. I mean, when the phrase early bird gets the worm is real because for a lot of the birding walks that I go on, I mean, they're at 8 and that's like super late. Which is like you missed all like the high drama by 2 hours. Yeah, I would just implore your listeners to just kind of like we got to be gentle with ourselves because there's a lot that we're processing,
Yep, yep.
uh, whether it's directly in our path or not.
Explore compassion. The word, read about it. I'm really interested in that in this late point in my life.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
just trying to have grace for myself so I can extend it to others.
oh, I'm not familiar with that, but I'm working on compassion. You're the best. Thank you very
Mhm.
much for doing this and for talking to me as always. We appreciate you and are so grateful to have you here.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!